Chapter 471. Is it the same? With an apathetic look in his eyes, Su Ming slowly flew into the sky. He did not look at the ground, and usually, wherever he went to, he would casually press down and seize the air if he ran into any undying souls, and they would all tremble before immediately breaking down into an endless amount of fog that chased after him. At that moment, he was the same as the old man in white robes. There were no differences between them. This process lasted for a very long time. A year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, perhaps even longer. Su Ming did not die anymore. He had only died twice. After dying twice and reviving subsequently, he continued moving forward to search for the moaning sound of the horn as he devoured an endless amount of white fog in this endless world. His strength turned him even more apathetic. The vacant look on his face was gone, and he was no longer exhausted, only calm. However, that calmness did not mean that his heart was calm, it was simply an expression of his apathy. He did not know just how many undying souls he had absorbed. He did not linger at any spot in that endless passage of time and only continued to move forward, continued devouring other souls. Su Ming had even devoured more than 9 existences like that red-haired man. Every single time he devoured an undying soul like this, Su Ming would become stronger. The act of pressing downwards and seizing the air had practically become a natural instinct by this point. One day, right before Su Ming, he saw a gigantic mountain that towered into the clouds. There was a gigantic statue of a dragon snake sitting around that mountain. That dragon snake's head was right below the peak of the sky, and it looked as if it was overlooking the ground. The moaning sounds of the horn traveled forth languidly from the mountain and from within the statue before spreading outwards to the entire area. The instant he saw the statue and the mountain, Su Ming sensed a powerful force within his apathetic heart summoning him. Undying warrior souls, come back. An ancient voice echoed in Su Ming's mind. There was a hint of age and time in that voice, and when it fell into his heart, it made him lurch. With an apathetic look in his eyes, he moved slowly forward, and when he was under the mountain, he leaped up before landing on the gigantic dragon snake's body. There was something guiding him in his heart, calling out to him to choose a scale on the dragon snake's body and sit there to wait for the other undying warrior souls to return. Su Ming moved forward on the dragon snake's huge scales. When he looked forward, he found that the scales on the dragon snake's body were closely packed together and there were about hundreds upon thousands of them. Su Ming sat down on one of them and stared forward with a blank look on his face. It was as if this was where he belonged. It was as if this was the end of his journey. The moaning sounds of the horn in the sky became clearer, and that sound gradually made him lethargic. His eyes gradually closed up, and an indescribable fatigue gradually submerged him like a flood. But the instant he almost completely shut his eyes, he dipped his head down and saw through the corner of his eyes a string of words hastily carved down, obviously left behind by a finger in a scale not too far away, right below him. I am Su Ming. These were the 4 words left behind on the scale. The instant he saw those 4 words, the pupils within his apathetic eyes shrank. He was clearly taken aback, and the 4 words seemed to have been enlarged several times as they flashed in his head with loud, booming noises. He stood up and stared fixedly at the string of letters. His breathing quickened and a huge storm raged in his heart. At the moment he saw those words, an incredibly familiar feeling shot up within him, as if he was the one who had carved those 4 words on the scale. The instant Su Ming's mind and soul were shaken, suddenly, that ancient voice that resounded in the air previously echoed between the sky and earth once again. Undying warrior souls, come back. When the voice reverberated in the air, an incredibly strong suction force immediately appeared on the scale under Su Ming's feet. He had no possible way of fighting against that suction force. It was as if the source of his incredible strength came from this statue, and if it could give him power, then it could also take it back whenever it wanted. As that suction force erupted forth, Su Ming's body faded away in an instant. A large amount of white fog spread out madly from his body and was rapidly absorbed by the scale under his feet. A sense of weakness filled Su Ming's entire mind and soul. His vision blurred, but the instant his vision faded and his body weakened, a thunderous roar resounded in his head, as if a bolt of lightning had just flashed past his head, causing him to remember everything right at that moment. He remembered what this place was, remembered why he came here, remembered his own identity, remembered the small snake, remembered the candle dragon, and remembered everything that had happened. He also remembered the candle dragon's curse and its words. If you fall and become corrupted, then I will devour the snake and resurrect myself successfully. If you wake up, then I will willingly let myself be devoured by my kind, and will bless its new life. I will not fall and become corrupted, I won't. I'm not an undying warrior soul, I am Su Ming. Su Ming lifted his head and roared. His legs had already disappeared, and a large part of his body was rapidly turning invisible. The instant he was about to be completely absorbed into the dragon snake scale, he lowered his head swiftly and used what remained of his right index finger along with all his remaining strength to write down a string of words on the scale. This is the candle dragon's undying and imperishable. The string of words were written beneath I am Su Ming, and were hastily scribbled down the instant Su Ming's body disappeared. The instant he finished writing those words and had just spelled out half of the word for world, his right hand turned into fog, along with his entire body. At that moment, he had turned completely into white fog and was absorbed into the scale. Su Ming died and vanished. With his death, the peace in the mountain was restored. The statue of the dragon snake continued staying on the mountain like a dead object, still and unmoving. However, if anyone walked on the hundreds of thousands of scales on its body and looked carefully, they would find that there were over 100,000 scales that were covered, in the same handwriting. I am Su Ming. I am Su Ming. I am Su Ming. This is the candle dragon. Undying and imperishable world. I am Su Ming, I have to wake up, I cannot fall and lose myself. I am Su Ming. The small snake is in danger, and only when I wake up can I save it. I am Su Ming from the Berserker tribe. I am Su Ming. Sky and earth, ice and fire. I am Su Ming. Don't devour the undying souls. Absolutely do not devour them. If I devour even a single one of them, then I won't be able to. Words like these covered more than 100,000 scales, and most of them were just covered in 4 words, I am Su Ming. There were only some that had 2 lines of words, and if someone looked carefully at each of these scales, they would find that the time when the 2 lines were carved onto the scale was different, and it was the same for all the scales with 2 lines. All of these were left behind by Su Ming. He did not just die twice, that was just what he retained in his memories at that moment. In truth, he had already arrived at this mountain and this statue numerous times. Each time he came here, right at the final moment before his body turned into white fog and he was about to be absorbed by the scales, he would remember everything. He had no way to resist this, and could only use this clumsy and foolish method to tell his next incarnation what this place was, what his mission was, what he wanted to do, and that he absolutely could not fall and lose himself. This was a really, really foolish method. It was also a sad and pitiful method. Yet similarly, Su Ming's tenacity and resolution could be seen from the words that covered more than 100,000 of the dragon snake scales, along with his persistence and madness. This was the candle dragon's undying and imperishable world. There was no strong sunlight in this vast world. While there was always light filling the area for all eternity, it was neither bright nor dull. White wisps of fog floated out of the white ground and gradually turned into illusory figures. There was one figure whose eyes were filled with a vacant grey shade when he opened his eyes. That figure was Su Ming. Time passed by, and he followed the swarm of undying souls towards the sound of the horn. Gradually, after dying several times, he would become the strongest among all the undying souls. With each step he took, he would continuously devour other souls to become stronger, a powerful warrior. He would obtain a great power, like mastering the skill of pressing downward and seizing the air, like making other objects speed up or slow down, like freezing an object in its place while having another move, or other battle abilities like this. He would use these skills to walk through the world and enjoy the comfortable feeling that came after devouring the undying souls and becoming stronger. He also went through having his eyes fill with a grey color before that grey hue faded away and a spark returned to his eyes. He would remember his name, but eventually, he would become apathetic and calm, and then, he would once again arrive at the place where the sound of the horn called out to him. He would come to a spot on the statue around the mountain, and the instant his body disappeared, he would remember everything. Then he would leave behind a string of words for his next incarnation that would come to this place, a string of words that symbolized his unwillingness to give up and a spirit that would never give in to despair. Perhaps his next incarnation would not be able to see those words, because there were simply too many scales there. Nonetheless, this was hope. This was his final hope, and the only way he could think of. He did not want to fall and lose himself. He wanted to fight back. Time passed by, and as Su Ming died and was reborn, then arrived at the statue time and again before leaving behind his words, almost every single one of the hundreds of thousands of scales on the dragon snake's body had his words scribbled on them. Most of them had 2 lines carved down, and there were some that had 3 lines of words carved down. Only a few of them had 4 lines, and less than 30 of them had 5 lines. I am Su Ming. This is the dead candle dragon's undying and imperishable world. The small snake is in danger, and only when I wake up can I save it. Understand the concept behind sky and earth, and ice and fire, find the binary opposite that belongs to you. This is the only way to leave this place. Don't devour the undying souls. Don't devour even a single one of them. Absolutely, do not devour even a single one of them. Chapter 472. Don't devour. Another month passed in the unknown space. Dressed in white, Su Ming calmly walked forth towards the spot where the sound of the horn came from and stood on a scale on the dragon snake's back. The instant he lowered his head, his body having returned to his spot on the dragon snake's body, that apathetic look on his face turned into one of disbelief. For a countless number of times, Su Ming had dragged his exhausted body along with an apathetic look on his face to stand on the dragon snake scale, and the instant he sat down, he would see the words on the scales. An expression of shocked horror would appear on his face, and he would lift his shivering right hand to carve down another string of words before his body disappeared. Again, and again, and again. The cycle repeated endlessly. Each time he woke up, he would walk right to his death, either dying in the hands of other undying souls or dying on the statue. His only gain was that there were more and more words left on the dragon snake scales. Each line of words signified one death, and this continued until all the scales were filled, until all the scales were covered with more than 5 lines. Each time he died and woke up, his mind would be muddled. Not a single bit of his memories would be left behind, as if they had been completely wiped away to continue this endless cycle. If he did not have those words, perhaps Su Ming would have truly lost himself in this undying and imperishable world. He would not be able to wake up for all eternity, and would sink into this endless cycle of struggling, then roaring, and then eventually turning apathetic. This was a cage. The bird would feel as if it had flown out, but the instant it died, it would realize abruptly that it was still in that cage. Only the instant he almost disappeared from the dragon snake's body would Su Ming remember everything. It was like a dream. When a person woke up from his dream, he would be confused, but the instant his confusion arrived, the dream would no longer be there. With those words on the scales, Su Ming forced himself to never forget, even through his deaths, to not let his will scatter even if he died, to make himself persevere. Even if the direction and the goal of his perseverance was indistinct, and even if he might not get a conclusion for everything that he did. This continued for an unknown amount of times, until one time, when Su Ming stood on the dragon snake, he landed on a scale with 5 lines of words. When he looked at the words left behind on the scale by his incarnations an unknown amount of years ago, he saw the words telling him not to devour the undying souls, and they made his heart tremble. The instant his body was about to disappear, he lifted his head and let out a roar filled with the unwillingness to admit defeat. With that roar, before his right hand disappeared, he pressed down on the scale. This time, he did not leave behind any words but drew a runic symbol on the scale. This was the framework for a rune he had discovered, after he recovered his memories, among all the divine abilities Hong Luo had left for him. The use of that rune was to produce vibrations and to increase the volume of a voice endlessly, turning that voice into an echo that would reverberate through the world. By what he remembered from Hong Luo's legacy, if he activated this rune in a vacant place, then he could let that echo last for a month. During that month, no matter how far someone was, they would still be able to hear it faintly. However, this rune was rather huge, and the line Su Ming carved was less than 1/100th of its completed form. It was far from enough for him to finish drawing the framework for the rune. However, Su Ming might have only managed to carve 1/100th of that rune, but he had the next time, and as time passed by and as he came to this place repeatedly, he would wake up right before his death and remember everything, and then he would work to complete the framework for the rune. He did make certain errors because the spot where he sat did not fulfill the requirements for him to draw the rune, but in the undying and imperishable realm, in those endless cycles of life and death, eventually, Su Ming managed to draw the final line of the rune on the dragon snake's body right before he woke up after his death. The instant he finished drawing the rune, Su Ming activated it, and with his strongest voice, he shouted his words. Don't devour any of the undying souls, do not devour even a single one of them. When he sent those words out and his body disappeared, the rune he had finally managed to draw after an endless amount of tries on the dragon snake's body began operating, increasing the volume of his voice endlessly and sending it in all directions with a loud rumble. His words were like waves as they echoed in the boundless world. 10 days after Su Ming's death, fog seeped out of a certain spot on the white ground in that vast and boundless world before it gathered together once again to turn into Su Ming's body. His body gradually gained corporeal form, and with grey eyes, he looked at his surroundings with a vacant stare, and his mind was an empty slate, void of memories. He looked at the grey sky and there was not a single thought in his head. It was just as if this was the first time he saw this sky, and he simply stared at it blankly. Fog rose around him slowly and gathered together to form some undying souls. Su Ming, who stood among the many undying souls, looked incredibly normal. There was nothing different about him. Once the bodies of the new undying souls formed, they lifted their heads slowly and looked at the grey sky, as if they were waiting for something. When the moaning sound of the horn traveled through the sky, it fell into Su Ming's ears. It caused his body to tremble, and he lowered his head like the other undying souls beside him before floating in the direction of where the sound of the horn came from. Su Ming did not know that he had repeated this action an endless amount of times. However, this time, before a day had even gone by, a furious roar reverberated violently between the sky and earth, alongside the moaning sound of the horn, in the boundless world. Don't devour any of the undying souls, do not devour even a single one of them. As that voice reverberated in the air, it fell into Su Ming's ears as well as the undying soul's ears. Su Ming froze for a moment in his movement to go forward. He lifted his head lightly and cast a glance at the sky, and after a moment of hesitation, he pretended that he did not hear it. The other undying souls also acted as if they did not hear the sound and continued floating forward. Time passed by, and another round of some undying souls letting out low roars and pouncing on their companions next to them to eat them happened again. This time, madness appeared Su Ming's grey eyes as well. He turned around swiftly and pounced on the absent-minded undying soul beside him. Right at the instant he was about to devour his companion and make himself stronger, that furious roar that screamed with an unwillingness to give in and sounded as if it was let out before someone died resounded once again through the endless sky. Don't devour any of the undying souls, do not devour even a single one of them. That voice had reached them many times over the past few days, and had been gradually growing weaker. As it echoed in the air, it fell in Su Ming's mind, causing him to freeze in his actions just as he was about to eat his companion. Struggle appeared in his grey eyes. There was originally not supposed to be anything in his blank mind, but those words were now echoing in his head. His grip around the undying soul slowly loosened. He did not know why, but the voice coming through the sky was incredibly familiar. As Su Ming let go of the undying soul, the strong souls around him had finished eating their companions, and after they became slightly stronger, they lifted their heads and roared towards the sky. That roaring sound fell into Su Ming's ears and made him struggle once again. This time, his struggles lasted for a long time, and when he eventually stopped struggling, he looked around him, and found that there was no longer any undying souls by his side. The undying souls that had been born with him had left in a group. Only Su Ming was left behind while struggling with himself. The other undying souls would not bother about his whereabouts, they would only listen to the calls from the horn and move non-stop towards their destination. Su Ming stood alone in the vast land with a vacant look on his face. After a long while, he lowered his head and floated forward slowly. The term probability is really just a coincidence and a change that happens in silence. Its appearance can usually not be controlled by man. It was just like possibilities. As an endless amount of ripples appears in the same manner and frequency, there is a possibility that a different type of ripple would appear. It was the same in the undying and imperishable world. Su Ming had no idea how many times he had been reincarnated. In fact, the question did not even exist in his head. Even if this was the umpteenth time he had woken up, to him, this was still the first time he woke up. This time, his awakening was different. He could not notice it, but only the people who had been observing him over the hundreds of thousands of times he died and woke up again would see that he was different this time. This time, due to the presence of that voice, Su Ming did not devour any other undying souls. He moved forward absent-mindedly, and continued moving forward even when the voice was no longer around after half a month had gone by. He continued floating forward, and on the way, he did not run into other undying souls. This was a first over the endless amount of years and endless amounts of awakenings he went through. As he floated for half a month in his absent-minded days, the grey hue in Su Ming's eyes grew stronger. A feeling of hunger and weakness also blossomed from the depths of his heart. Occasionally, he would look around and search for the fountain that would stop his hunger and weakness. He had encountered souls before, but every single time he saw them, that voice that had already disappeared in his head would echo weakly, making his struggles become stronger. He longed to devour something, but that familiar voice stopped him from eating. In fact, as time passed by, he even grew to have a vague feeling that he could not devour any undying souls. When his struggles reached their peak, he saw a dozen-something undying souls floating forward absent-mindedly on the white land. Su Ming could no longer suppress the desire to eat, and he charged forward. The dozen-something undying souls were clearly newborn souls that had no shred of intelligence whatsoever in them. Su Ming closed in on one of them, and just as the soul was about to be eaten, an intense wave of struggle appeared on Su Ming's face. He roared, and his eyes were no longer grey. A purplish-red tint appeared, and in his struggles, he gave up on eating that soul. Instead, he lifted his right hand and rammed it against the undying soul's head, causing its body to break up. The instant the undying soul died, a bang resounded suddenly in Su Ming's head, and a pain as if his mind was being ripped apart rushed through him. In the midst of that, clarity surfaced in Su Ming's pupils. I am Su Ming. Chapter 473, Imperishable Soul. This was the first time Su Ming reawakened his memories without eating any undying souls. As his memories woke up, he learned of his name. He closed his eyes, and the undying souls around him slowly floated into the distance. They were still in an absent-minded state, and they would not think of resisting that call. As for the undying soul that Su Ming had scattered away, some white fog spread out from its body and surrounded Su Ming, as if it yearned to enter his body. However, after a long while, when Su Ming opened his eyes, he saw the white fog and walked out of it quietly. He did not absorb a single bit of it. His other memories besides his name still remained muddled, but the desire to devour undying souls and kill them had diminished slightly. Some shred of intelligence had appeared in his grey eyes. He floated forward slowly along the ground. Half a year passed by in the blink of an eye. Su Ming went through numerous battles, but he no longer absorbed that white fog. Usually, as long as the undying souls did not travel in a big group, when he saw a swarm of them, he would rush over silently. If he did not absorb the white fog, then he would not become stronger. That was why his job would be easier if he ran into the absent-minded ones who did not know how to fight back. If he ran into the undying souls that had become stronger after devouring their companions, it would be a lot more difficult for him to kill them. However, as Su Ming continued with the massacre, while he did not get stronger, he did reawaken more memories, and he remembered some of his divine abilities. He remembered the wind separation slash, remembered the lightning berserker art, remembered some of the legacy Hong Luo had left for him. With these methods, he decided in his silence to not fight against the undying souls that did not know how to resist any longer, but instead chose to search for the stronger souls and fight against them. With each battle, Su Ming gradually learned of many of his shortcomings. He was not decisive enough when he attacked and wasted too much energy. He could not kill with just one strike. In fact, when he ran into danger, he would make mistakes in his choices. The price for all of this was that his body had broken down several times, and he even died twice. Perhaps it was because he did not eat any undying souls, but even after dying twice, he was still greatly different when he reawakened. His memories were no longer muddled and remained in the same state as before his death. Each time he died, he would think about the reason behind his failure, and then he would continue fighting against others. He could clearly sense himself becoming stronger. This strength did not come from devouring undying souls, but was his personal grasp towards battle, his understanding towards his arts, and his judgments based on his will. He had already given up on a lot of useless fancy movements when he attacked. He became decisive and determined. Once he attacked, he would go straight for his target, and no laxness in his guard or easing up could be found in his movements. Gradually, as he increased the number of kills under his belt, as he continued dying and reviving, as he concluded the reasons behind his failures and improved, he became faster when he killed his opponents. He started focusing his attention on the strong souls in big swarms of undying souls instead of the small groups. By doing so, the number of strong souls he would have to face would increase exponentially. To him, the level of danger would also increase, but not only did these sorts of fights transform Su Ming's battle skills, they also helped him continuously reawaken his memories. Not only did he remember his divine abilities, he also remembered his own name. In fact, he had even remembered that this was the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world. But that was not all. After dying several dozens of times and killing an unknown amount of undying souls, because he had given up on devouring the white fog, everything that had happened in his last incarnation returned to his memory. He saw everything that had happened when he devoured undying souls in his last incarnation, right up to the moment when he went to the place the sound of the horn was coming from and died there. His memories stopped there, and he could no longer remember more. Even the memory of when he went to the dragon snake's body during the previous incarnation was fuzzy. He did not know why he did all those things and why he carved down those marks on the scales. However, he had a feeling that if he continued this way, then someday, he would definitely remember everything. The killings continued. Su Ming wore a black robe and his hair moved without wind. He had changed the Wind Berserker's art with his own method, and he did the same thing for the Lightning Berserker art. This sort of change caused the lethality of the arts to become even more precise. Time passed by this way slowly. 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. Su Ming moved through a swarm of undying souls numbering to thousands. He did not stop for even a single moment. Wherever he went to, with a single tap from his right index finger, strong wind would start blowing out of nowhere. With a punch from his left hand, lightning would crackle, causing a large area to explode and disintegrate. There were dozens of strong souls in a swarm near Su Ming. When he walked past them, their bodies fell apart and they turned into white fog, but Su Ming did not absorb them. This sort of killings could no longer satisfy him and could not give him any more experience. This sort of fight could no longer let him experience danger. Over the 100 years of fighting, he had died nearly 100 times as well. However, with each revival, Su Ming would think about the reason behind his death and rectify the cause, which allowed him to surpass himself. His will had gone through an unimaginable ordeal over the 100 years. As he continued fighting and as his memories were restored, he recalled more incarnations, along with everything that happened in those previous incarnations. His expression gradually turned apathetic. However, while this apathy seemed the same as in his previous incarnations, in truth, it was completely different. This apathy was due to habit, due to indifference. The apathy that had appeared in his previous incarnations was based on ignorance. One of them was due to habit, and the other lack of intelligence. These two types of apathy were like heaven and earth. Fatigue had also come to Su Ming's body. This fatigue brought by the repeated murders, along with the feeling that he had to continue fighting to restore his memories, made him feel haggard both in mind and soul. However, this had to continue. Another 100 years passed, and he remembered his previous 10,000 incarnations. The memories he regained allowed him to know all the areas in the vast land in the undying and imperishable world like the back of his palm. He started focusing his attention on the undying warrior souls that were like the red-haired man he met in the past. Only these sort of warrior souls could let him experience the danger of death when he fought against them. If the sky exists, then the ground will definitely exist as well. Su Ming attacked as he fought against a person shrouded in black fog in the sky. That person shrouded in black fog let out a low roar that shook the sky, and his attacks alternated between cold and heat. They were attacks born when ice and fire were stacked against each other. If fire exists, then ice will definitely exist as well. On a hillside on the Great White Land, Su Ming fought against an old man. That old man's head was covered in white and his eyes were filled with apathy, but when he pressed down and seized the air, Su Ming disintegrated multiple times and died. However, each time he woke up, he would continue fighting. If pressure can cause something to fall apart, then a suction force that devours will definitely exist. Su Ming was fighting with everything he had against a man who stood 30 feet tall in midair. That man's fist contained the sensation of lightness and heaviness simultaneously, and it was difficult for people to endure his attacks. He roared furiously, and most of the time, 2 words could be heard in his roars. Imperishable soul. The words undying and imperishable in the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world have the same concept. Su Ming sat down cross-legged on one of the mountains on the White Land as he mumbled while looking at the grey sky. His memories had recovered to the time before the several hundreds of thousands of incarnations. 400 years had passed by. During those 400 years, he did not absorb a single wisp of white fog. He just relied on himself, fighting, dying, and resurrecting again and again. There were many people here that he still could not win against, just like the 30 feet tall man, as well as the old man who performed the act of pressing down and seizing the air. Su Ming had died multiple times because of them. Everything here has a binary opposite. Just like the act of pressing down and seizing air. When the old man presses down, he delivers power to destroy multiple things, and when he seizes the air, he absorbs that fog to nourish his own soul. Those fast and slow attacks, those light and heavy blows, and many more, all of them are different types of binary opposites. Su Ming closed his eyes, and a pensive expression appeared on his apathetic face. The undying soul was me when I went through all those reincarnations. I continued absorbing the fog here to nourish my soul and become stronger, and the imperishable soul would be the path I am taking right now. They are like 2 polar opposites. The word undying means that the soul will never truly die and will be revived, but once the soul is revived, its memories will disappear and not a single one of them will remain. Imperishable would mean that my memories won't perish. I can retain my original memories even after waking up after all the multiple times I died. Perhaps the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world was prepared for the imperishable souls right from the start. But to become imperishable would require great will. If you don't have that sort of will, it is incredibly difficult to persevere to the end. Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed offhandedly at a spot behind him. A short person immediately crawled out from the air behind him. That person had an apathetic expression on his face, and he widened his mouth, ready to devour Su Ming. But Su Ming's finger had already arrived at the center of the person's brows. The short person's body exploded with a bang and turned into white fog. With a sweep of an arm, the fog spread into the distance. This sort of thing was already like breathing to Su Ming, and he did not even hesitate in his movements. I have to search for a binary opposite that belongs solely to me. It's not the sky and earth, not ice and fire, not pressing down and seizing air, not lightness and heaviness, and neither is it swiftness and slowness. Su Ming opened his eyes and looked at the grey sky. In his silence, he let his mind wander. Time trickled by. 100 years, 200, 300. Su Ming continued sitting there. There was a large amount of white fog around him, and that white fog came from all the undying souls he had killed in this place. The existence of that white fog was an incredibly enticing thing for many undying souls. Usually, some would appear to absorb that white fog so that they would become stronger, but the instant they pounced on Su Ming, he would tap at the center of their brows, and they would explode and die with a bang. After the past 700 years of fighting and thinking, that one tap came to be, and it was a killing move born of the culmination of all the divine abilities Su Ming had obtained through the Wind Berserker arts, the Lightning Berserker arts, the divine abilities he could use as a nascent soul cultivator, and all the memories of all the things he went through over the numerous incarnations in this place. This killing move was very simple. Only a tap was required. However, that one tap contained the speed of lightning, the power of wind, the mysteriousness within the movement of pressing down and seizing air, the source behind lightness and heaviness, the laws behind swiftness and slowness, and Su Ming's life and soul. One day, in the endless cycles of incarnations, the memory of the very first time Su Ming had appeared in this world returned. He remembered why he came here, remembered the small snake, remembered the old man in black robes, and remembered the words that made his heart tremble when he was fighting against the candle dragon. The fusion between the sky and earth, the fusion between ice and fire. Fusion. For the first time in the hundreds of years Su Ming sat there, he opened his eyes, and a brilliant light could be seen within them. I understand now. Chapter 474. Destiny. There are plenty of things in the world that are binary opposites of each other, and it's even more so in this undying and imperishable world. This is because the candle dragon's desire is to devour the nine-headed dragon. It is just as it said, since the universe already has the candle dragon, then why is there a need for the nine-headed dragon to exist? This is the legacy of the candle dragons. But clearly, this candle dragon didn't manage to devour the nine-headed dragon. That's why this undying and imperishable world is imperfect. Since the candle dragon is dead, even its will was left frozen the moment it opened up this world and sucked me inside. If that is the case, it means that this undying and imperishable world is imperfect. There is a great flaw in this place, and this flaw has become the candle dragon's regret. That flaw is this so-called fusion that is shown in this place. In truth, there is no such thing as true fusion. It doesn't matter whether it's lightness and heaviness, swiftness or slowness, or this pressing down and seizing air. All of this is just the candle dragon's imitation in this undying and imperishable world. Su Ming's eyes shone with a brilliant light and he lifted his head to look at the grey sky. Fusion is the core of the undying and imperishable world. It is also the truth that the candle dragon has laid out. It once said that it devoured 97 world planes. Then is it possible to say that the candle dragon's undying and imperishable world is formed by all these devoured world planes? This world is formed so that the candle dragon could use it to gain an epiphany, all for the sake of devouring the nine-headed dragon someday, so that it could complete its race's mission and fulfill its people's desires over the years. To leave this place, I will have to either obtain a power to break this place and force my way out, or I will have to find out what true fusion is. But what exactly is my fusion? Su Ming mumbled as he looked at the grey sky, his eyes filling with uncertainty. Life and death. Su Ming's eyes gradually lit up with a brilliant sparkle. In the blink of an eye, another 30 years passed. During them, Su Ming sat on the hill without moving an inch, constantly thinking and trying to understand the true meaning behind fusion. He was immersed in a strange situation. A feeling of ages past radiated off his face, and an air of time slowly emerged from his body. There was an increasing amount of white fog around him, and it was all formed by the undying souls that tried to eat Su Ming over the years. That white fog continuously attracted more undying souls to the place. However, when these undying souls closed in on Su Ming, they would immediately explode with shrill cries and die, turning into white fog. Those souls continuously woke up beside Su Ming and died. The process repeated itself incessantly and turned into a ceaseless cycle. The hundreds upon thousands of incarnations is an exchange between death and life. It's very easy for a person to find the signs that mark life and death during this process, but it doesn't matter whether it is life or death. In the undying and imperishable world, there is no one who is truly alive, and neither is there anyone who is truly dead. No matter how much I go through, this is still just like a dream. When I wake up, everything will remain an illusion. This isn't my fusion. On the day 30 years later, Su Ming opened his eyes and shook his head. He lifted his right hand and casually swung it outward. With that one swing, the thick white fog immediately spread out and only stopped when it had traveled 100,000 feet away from Su Ming. At the same time, distortions began to appear around him, even though he remained seated. If anyone was looking, they would feel that they could see Su Ming with their eyes, but in their perception, the place where he sat was empty. Before long, reawakened undying souls seeped out of the ground in succession. These undying souls seemed to not have seen Su Ming and did not pounce on him as they normally would have done. Instead, they left the place with a vacant look in their eyes, and gradually, no more undying souls were born in Su Ming's area. Even the souls passing by could not discover Su Ming's existence and simply floated past him. Another 20 years passed by, and during them, Su Ming never once stopped thinking. Lightness and heaviness. Swiftness and slowness. Pressing down and seizing. These things are simply different in terms of their characteristics, and I learned them from others during my numerous incarnations. They don't belong to me. These binary opposites must have come to be because of the 97 worlds the candle dragon devoured. These aren't my fusions. My fusion has to belong solely to me. Su Ming mumbled. What could it possibly be? Su Ming closed his eyes. He had been thinking about this for 50 years, and he still had not obtained his answer. Feeling lost, he gradually immersed himself in his memories and looked through them. The pictures in those memories were unfamiliar to him. After all, he had gone through hundreds of thousands of incarnations here, and many years had gone by during that time. As he looked through those memories, he saw himself bringing the two youths whose names he had forgotten into the world of Nine Yin, then to the Candle Dragon's burial ground. He saw himself entering the Candle Dragon's body and also saw the old man in black robes. Everything that transpired in the world of Nine Yin flashed by quickly. Then he saw a rather familiar mountain range and remembered that it was the location of his cave abode. Then he saw Hong Luo, saw Di Qian, and saw the ninth summit. His memories continued running backwards, and from the ninth summit, he returned to Han Mountain City, and then from Han Mountain City, he returned to Dark Mountain. The things that happened in Dark Mountain were things that he would never forget. His elder, Bei Ling, Wu La, Lei Chen, Shan Hen, and also Bai Ling. All of this is my past. As Su Ming recollected his past, grief rose in his heart, but a soul could not cry. If it could, then tears would have fallen out of Su Ming's eyes. The most precious things in my life are Dark Mountain, the ninth summit, and my past. What I want to protect are also Dark Mountain, the ninth summit, and my past. Su Ming whispered softly. I cannot change anything in the past. It is buried in my memories, along with all the years I have lived. The past is in my hands, and I will never forget anyone. This is one side of my life. Su Ming opened his eyes. They were dull but looked profound, as if the universe itself was contained within them. One side of this binary opposite is what has been set in stone after it has happened, and the other side is continual changes that would occur for what has not happened. If my past is one side of my life, then the other side would be my future. Su Ming fell silent for a moment and his gaze fell on the endless world in the distance. A faint look of absent-mindedness appeared in his eyes. As his mind wandered, he seemed to see himself tied up by multiple chains in a black swamp located in an abyss in the ground. There were 9 black dragons blowing black fog at him, and there were several people in the sky above him, looking at him warily and coldly. They did not say a word, merely looked at him silently. The scene changed, and he saw himself with purple hair standing at the highest spot in the sky as he looked at the earth with an aloof gaze. An innumerable amount of lives knelt down and worshipped him on the ground. The scene changed once again, and he saw himself lying on an altar with golden needles stabbing his entire body. A large amount of smoke spread out from his body and it was all absorbed by the thousands of people sitting cross-legged around him. When they absorbed that smoke, delight would show on their faces, and it was a stark contrast compared to his face, twisted in pain. The pictures had not ended. They changed once again, and it was difficult for Su Ming to know whether this was just an illusion or whether it truly happened before. He saw himself once again. This time, he had long red hair, and he was dressed in a white long robe. There was a hint of loneliness in his eyes and a touch of grief on his face. His hands, stained with blood, were filled with a murderous aura that surged into the skies, as if hundreds upon millions of lives had been crushed by his hands. He stood in a world where the stars sparkled in the dark. There were an endless amount of corpses around him. He was the only person standing there, and he roared towards the sky, a shrill roar that caused the world Su Ming saw shatter into millions of pieces. That roar was filled with an indescribable grief and a burning rage that could destroy the sky and earth. At that moment, as Su Ming sat on the hill, his vision crumbled and fell apart with a bang, turning into wisps of grey fog that scattered away. His world shattered and disappeared in an instant. It was as if his eyes could not withstand all that he saw in that strange condition. At the instant his vision shattered, Su Ming lifted his head. His eyes were empty, and the world before him was black, just darkness that stretched endlessly. He should originally not be able to see anything in that darkness, but at that moment, he saw. He saw a frail infant with no life force remaining within him. His entire body was filled with the air of death. He saw a man with purple hair standing there with exhaustion and grief seeping out of his entire body as he let out a silent roar towards the skies. He saw the entire world and all of heaven crumble as that silent roar tumbled out of the man's lips. He saw the man with purple hair walking towards the baby. He saw them slowly fusing together the instant they got closer to each other. It was as if the man filled with grief wanted to protect the baby while holding him in his arms, just like how Su Ming protected his past. He saw. No one can see the world that I see. These words came out of Su Ming's mouth in a whisper. There was a pair of hands in a wanderer's eyes that symbolized his deeply rooted longing ache for his home. There was a pair of hands in the eyes of a pair of lovers who stayed together despite times of hardship that symbolized an eternity of being together. There was a pair of hands in a lonely person's eyes that simply meant an addition of palm lines as time went by. There was a pair of hands in a child's eyes that symbolized an unforgettable attachment. There was a pair of hands whose palms symbolized the past, and the back of which symbolized the future. If one did not want to, then the memories in his palms would forever be protected in his grasp. If he did not want to, then no one could see his palm lines and see his past. The only thing anyone could see was the back of that person's hands, forever and ever. There was a pair of hands where the left symbolized infancy, and the right symbolized old age. The changeable distance between these two hands symbolized his life. My fusion is the fusion between the past and the future. With my past, I will urge my future self to be stronger. Then with the strength of my future self, I will protect my past. When I was born, I couldn't control my own fate. Once I grow up, I will step on fate itself. When the past and future fuse together, they will become the present. Su Ming opened his eyes, and the emptiness caused by the shattering of his vision turned into calmness. This is my fusion, and I will call it. The shadow of a cold sneer appeared on Su Ming's lips. I will call it destiny. Chapter 475. Undying and Imperishable World. Open. The instant Su Ming said that word, he stood up, and even if someone was beside him, they would not be able to see the world he saw in his empty eyes right at that moment. He stood on the hill and took a deep breath. He had already stayed in this place for countless years, and he still had many things he wanted to do. Use his awakening to make the candle dragons will completely disappear, and in exchange, have his small snake obtain the serendipity only given to its kind. He remained silent for a while before lifting his foot and walking forward. As he walked, he ran into numerous undying souls. However, they seemed to not have seen him and just let him walk past, remaining blissfully ignorant and unaware of his presence. It did not matter whether it was the battles to devour each other between hundreds of undying souls, or even thousands, or tens upon thousands, or even the shocking battles between hundreds upon thousands of undying souls. In fact, even the undying souls engaged in the battles that numbered to more than the 100,000s, or the millions, and even tens of millions, could not see Su Ming, just like Su Ming, whose eyes remained empty, could not see them. Su Ming walked past these numerous undying souls, and neither he nor the undying souls touched each other. It was as if everything in the world followed a certain law, and that was if Su Ming's heart remained calm and his eyes did not see, then everything did not exist. The path he took did not change no matter what happened, and that direction he was headed to was the spot where he eventually scattered away in all his numerous incarnations, the towering mountain and the gigantic statue of the dragon snake. As Su Ming walked forward, he met the apathetic old man in white robes flying through the sky and also ran into the man who had mastered the skill of lightness and heaviness charging through the ground. He ran into many other undying warrior souls as he moved forward, but he did not see them, and neither did they see him. An unknown amount of time passed by, and eventually, a towering mountain appeared before Su Ming. There was a dreary air surrounding the giant statue as its body was illuminated by the grey sky. This was the first time Su Ming came to this place since he recovered all his memories. He looked at the mountain as if he could see it. I'm about to leave now, Su Ming whispered under his breath. Just as he was about to walk forward, his footsteps suddenly froze, and he slowly turned his head around. No light could be seen shining from his empty eyes, but his gaze was directed towards an apathetic old man dragging his exhausted body towards the mountain. That old man was dressed in black robes, and his face was decorated by age. He walked towards the mountain as if he was on a pilgrimage, and perhaps he was the same as Su Ming, going through an unknown number of incarnations before he eventually made it to this place, then reincarnated, falling into another cycle that would never end and never cease. That old man was the person who had appeared within the Candle Dragon's body in an attempt to use the small snake to threaten the remnants of the Candle Dragon's will, forcing it to activate the undying and imperishable world. He was Di Qian's servant, the person who monitored Su Ming's actions in the land of the Berserkers. But a pity, he underestimated the Candle Dragon's pride. It was why the strand of his divine sense was forcefully absorbed into the undying and imperishable world to suffer through endless cycles of life and death. He had also dragged his body into this mess, forcing himself to endure the curse eating away at his body. As if he could see, Su Ming looked in the old man's direction. After a long while, he lifted his feet and walked towards the old man. When he got closer, the old man remained blissfully unaware and ignorant of his presence, simply continuing on with his path towards the mountain that was summoning him. Su Ming walked beside the old man in black robes. Then, with a calm expression, he lifted his right hand and plunged it into the old man's soul. That person's body jolted and pain appeared on his face. The instant he wanted to struggle, Su Ming brought his hand out, and there was a wisp of green fog in his palm. That fog surrounded Su Ming's hand and stayed in his palm. Once he seized it, he no longer bothered himself with the old man and walked towards the mountain. Su Ming would not kill the old man, because suffering through the endless cycles of life here was worse than dying. It would just bring the old man happiness if Su Ming killed him. What he wanted to kill was the old man's body outside. Only by killing him would Su Ming be able to quell his hatred. When Su Ming arrived at the mountain and stepped on the many scales on the dragon snake's body, he sensed the familiar words written on them. Those words symbolized his incarnations and his perseverance. Su Ming began walking towards the dragon snake's head, and when he eventually reached there, he lifted his head and looked at the sky. Candle Dragon, since this is the fate of your kind, then there is nothing wrong about you wanting to devour my snake. I respect you. I have woken up despite your curse, and now, I will walk out of this place. Su Ming spoke quietly, but the instant he said those words, wind suddenly stirred in the peaceful gray sky, and clouds surged in the heavens. Thunderous roars that shook the skies traveled forth. A thunderclap sounded as if the sky itself was roaring, causing the old man in black robes to shudder and kneel on the ground. All the other undying souls in the endless world also shuddered in the midst of their fights and prostrated themselves on the ground. Fear, too, had appeared on the faces of the powerful undying warrior souls, and all of them fell down on the ground to worship the sky. The thunderclap seemed to be a response to Su Ming's words. Once he finished speaking, with a calm expression, he stood on the dragon snake's head and lifted both of his hands slowly. My palms symbolize my past, and the back of my hands represent my future. Su Ming lifted his right hand high into the sky with his palm facing downward while the back of his hand was turned upward, then moved his left hand in the opposite direction. The fusion of the past and present will appear when these two hands come into contact, and the power when the past and future fuse together will bloom. Su Ming's right hand began descending slowly towards his left hand. I call the power of fusing the past and future together as destiny. During that instant, Su Ming's right hand and left hand touched each other. Right when they came into contact, Su Ming's body began trembling viciously. Veins popped up on his face. His long hair started dancing in the air without wind and his robes fluttered furiously. Behind him, an illusory figure of a baby appeared. That baby did not cry. He had his eyes wide open, and there was only gray in there, as if he was dead. The world distorted and a man with purple hair gradually emerged. The man's face was filled with grief as he lifted his head to look at the sky. The instant he appeared, an astonishing change immediately happened in the undying and imperishable world. The gray sky started rotating as if it was fog. The white hue on the ground instantly turned black as if it was dyed in ink and started trembling viciously. The fusion of destiny, first fusion. The instant Su Ming started mumbling, the illusory man with purple hair standing before him moved towards him, and at the same time, a gray light shone in the baby's eyes and he charged towards Su Ming from behind him. At that instant, the past and future turned into a gigantic vortex around Su Ming. The vortex became increasingly faster as it spun, and eventually, it sucked Su Ming inside. He disappeared, and during that moment, there was only a gigantic vortex above the dragon snake's head above the mountain in that world. That vortex spun with loud rumbling sounds. Within it contained Su Ming's future, past, and his present. All of this had turned into the greatest creation he had gained out of his epiphany in the undying and imperishable realm. Destiny. As that vortex spun, a hand shot out from within. It was a pale hand, and it seemed to contain no strength. However, the instant that hand stretched out, it slowly curled its fingers into a fist, and the rapidly spinning vortex froze instantaneously before charging straight towards it, making it seem like the hand had completely frozen the vortex during the process it formed that fist. When the vortex disappeared, a person appeared on the dragon snake's head. It was a boy with half a head of purple hair and the other half white. He looked to be only about 8 or 9 years old, but his skin gave off a dreary air. However, his eyes shone with the light of eternity. He lifted his head and stared at the grey sky coldly. Without a single word, he abruptly charged upwards, and the instant he got closer, he lifted his right hand and pressed against the sky, as if he was supporting it. The grey shade that was rotating in the sky as if it was fog let out a huge rumble. The entire sky started trembling and the fog started rolling backwards, layer by layer, as if those layers were being stripped off one by one. It was as if the sky had turned into a gigantic wooden block, and it was rapidly becoming thinner with each passing moment. Right at that moment, a thunderous rumble that sounded like a furious roar sliced towards that boy from all directions. Soon after, all the undying souls in the undying and imperishable world exploded with a shiver, turning into a large amount of white fog that charged upwards. The endless white fog filled the entire sky in an instant before gathering together swiftly right where Su Ming was. As that white fog merged together, it turned into a gigantic body whose end could not be seen before Su Ming, and it was the candle dragon. It roared and opened its mouth wide towards him. Compared to it, Su Ming was like an ant, but not a single hint of change could be detected on his face. Almost the instant the gigantic candle dragon devoured him, he lifted his left hand and pressed downwards. At that moment, he had his right hand supporting the sky and his left hand pressing down on the ground. As he pushed forcefully with both his hands, the sky and earth started rumbling violently. Then, a large amount of visible cracks that could be seen with the naked eye appeared in the sky, and as the ground shook, deep chasms tore through the land. Undying and imperishable world, open. This was the first sentence Su Ming said after he fused his past and present together. His voice was icy cold, containing both an ancient air and a feeling of youthfulness, giving off an incredible impression to others. The instant Su Ming said those words, he forcefully pushed upwards and downwards with both hands again. Right at that moment, a crack suddenly appeared right at the center of the 10th moon in the world of 9 yin. It was as if a great force was tearing it apart from within. That strange change immediately caught the attention of all the living in the world of 9 yin, plunging them into shock. At the same time, as the fossilized candle dragon laid in its burial ground, a crack also appeared right in the middle of the third eye at the center of its brows on its gigantic head, just like on the 10th moon in the sky. It was as if there was someone who wanted to force that eye to open.